I'm Commander Elena Rodriguez, 32, and when my father, a retired Army colonel, called me a traitor to the family for my classified Navy assignment, he had no idea what he'd just said to his own daughter. For 3 years, he'd been telling everyone I was a disgrace who'd abandoned family values for a meaningless military career. Then at my cousin's wedding, Admiral Harrison approached our table and said 3 words that made my father's face go completely white: "Your daughter's classified." What my family discovered about my real job in the Navy would shatter everything they thought they knew about honor, sacrifice, and what it truly means to serve your country. What do you think those 3 words meant and how they changed everything? Drop your theories below. If you love stories where military heroes get the recognition they deserve from their own families, smash that like button and subscribe because this father-daughter military revenge is absolutely perfect. The way my father's attitude completely changed will give you chills. Growing up as the daughter of Colonel Miguel Rodriguez was like living in a military museum where every achievement, every tradition, and every expectation revolved around a legacy of Army service that stretched back 4 generations. The Rodriguez family had produced officers for the Army since World War II, and my father never let me forget that continuing this tradition was not just my privilege, it was my obligation. Rodriguez men serve in the Army, my father would tell me from the time I could understand what the uniform hanging in his closet represented. Your great-grandfather served in World War II, your grandfather in Korea and Vietnam, I served in Desert Storm and Afghanistan. This family bleeds Army green, and that's not going to change with you. The problem was that I wasn't a Rodriguez man, and my father had never quite figured out how to reconcile his military legacy expectations with having a daughter instead of the son he'd planned to mold into the next generation of Army officers. When my younger brother Carlos was born 3 years after me, my father finally had the male heir he'd been hoping for, and the pressure on me to follow the family military path seemed to ease. But Carlos had absolutely no interest in military service. He was artistic, gentle, and completely unimpressed by our father's war stories and uniform displays. By the time he was 16, it was clear that Carlos would rather pursue music and theater than follow in the family's military footsteps, leaving my father disappointed and scrambling to salvage his legacy dreams. That's when the pressure shifted back to me with a vengeance. Despite being female, I was athletic, disciplined, and genuinely interested in military history and strategy. I'd grown up hearing stories about military campaigns, studying maps of famous battles, and understanding the principles of leadership that had made the Rodriguez family respected in military circles. Elena, my father told me during my senior year of high school, Carlos obviously isn't cut out for military service, which means you're the only one who can carry on the family tradition. I've already spoken to contacts at West Point about your application. The assumption that I would automatically follow his preferred path for my military career was typical of my father's approach to family planning. He'd decided that I should attend West Point, commission as an Army officer, and hopefully marry another Army officer who would appreciate the Rodriguez military heritage. But I had different ideas about my future, ideas that would ultimately create a rift between my father and me that would take years to heal and would require intervention from the highest levels of Navy leadership to resolve. I was fascinated by naval history, international maritime law, and the strategic challenges of defending America's interests on the world's oceans. While my father collected Army memorabilia and told stories about ground campaigns, I was reading about naval battles, studying the tactics of famous admirals, and dreaming about commanding ships rather than leading soldiers. When I announced my intention to apply to the Naval Academy instead of West Point, my father's reaction was swift and devastating. "The Navy?" he said with disgust. "Elena, this family has served in the Army for 4 generations. You don't just abandon that tradition because you have some romantic idea about sailing around the world." The fight that followed was epic and painful. My father accused me of being selfish and disrespectful to family traditions. He threatened to refuse to sign my service academy application paperwork. He enlisted my mother, my grandparents, and various relatives to pressure me into coming to my senses and choosing the Army over the Navy. "You're breaking a family tradition that goes back to your great-grandfather," my mother pleaded. "Can't you just go to West Point and serve in the Army like your father wants?" But I was 17 years old, stubborn as hell, and convinced that my military career should be about serving my country in the way that inspired me most, not about fulfilling my father's expectations for continuing a family tradition I'd never asked to inherit. The compromise we eventually reached was fragile and resentful on both sides. My father agreed to support my Naval Academy application, but he made it clear that he considered my choice a betrayal of family values and a rejection of everything the Rodriguez military legacy represented. "Fine," he said when I received my Naval Academy appointment. "Go play sailor if that's what you want. But don't expect me to be proud of you for abandoning your family's military heritage." The 4 years I spent at the Naval Academy were academically and professionally successful, but personally isolating because my father's disapproval cast a shadow over every achievement and milestone. While other midshipmen celebrated accomplishments with proud families, I navigated my military education knowing that my father viewed my success as evidence of my betrayal rather than proof of my potential. What I didn't realize at the time was that my father's disappointment would deepen into something much more toxic as my naval career progressed and took directions that he couldn't understand or appreciate. After graduating from the Naval Academy, I was commissioned as an ensign and began what would become a naval career that exceeded every expectation I'd had for myself and challenged every assumption my father had made about military service and family loyalty. My first assignment was aboard a destroyer in the Pacific Fleet, where I learned that leading sailors in the real Navy was both more demanding and more rewarding than anything the Academy had prepared me for. The transition from midshipman to junior naval officer was intense and educational. I was responsible for managing complex weapons systems, leading divisions of experienced sailors, and making decisions that could impact both mission success and crew safety. The leadership challenges were exactly what I'd hoped for when I'd chosen the Navy over the Army, and I thrived in the maritime environment that my father had never understood or appreciated. But every professional success seemed to widen the gap between my father and me. When I was promoted to lieutenant junior grade ahead of my peer group, his response was lukewarm congratulations followed by comments about how real military leadership happened on land, not at sea. When I was selected for advanced training in naval intelligence, he dismissed it as desk work that wasn't comparable to the combat leadership roles he'd held in the Army. "Elena, you're wasting your potential on this Navy nonsense," he told me during one particularly painful phone conversation. "You could have been commanding soldiers in real combat situations, but instead you're playing with computers on some ship somewhere." The fundamental misunderstanding was that my father viewed military service through the narrow lens of his own Army experience and couldn't appreciate the unique challenges and opportunities that naval service provided. To him, leadership meant commanding infantry in ground combat, and anything else was a lesser form of military service that didn't deserve the same respect or recognition. My mother tried to mediate between us, but she was caught between her husband's rigid expectations and her daughter's obvious success in a career path he couldn't appreciate. "Elena, can't you just explain to your father what you're doing? Maybe if he understood your job better, he'd be more supportive." But the problem wasn't that my father didn't understand my job, it was that he'd decided my career choices were inherently less valuable than the path he'd wanted me to follow. Every attempt to share my professional achievements was met with comparisons to what I could have been doing if I'd chosen the Army instead. The situation became even more complicated when I was selected for a specialized assignment that I couldn't discuss in detail due to security clearances and operational requirements. The Navy was investing significant resources in my professional development, sending me to advanced schools and giving me responsibilities that indicated I was being groomed for senior leadership positions. But from my father's perspective, my inability to share specific details about my work was evidence that I was involved in meaningless bureaucratic nonsense rather than the kind of real military service that produced clear, measurable results he could understand and appreciate. "If your job was actually important," he said during one family gathering, "you'd be able to talk about it. The fact that it's all classified probably means you're just pushing papers around and calling it military service." The irony was devastating. The more successful I became in my naval career, the more my father viewed me as a disappointment who'd wasted her military potential on inferior service that didn't measure up to the Rodriguez family's Army tradition. The breaking point came when I was promoted to lieutenant commander at age 28, making me one of the youngest officers in the Navy to achieve that rank. The promotion was recognition of exceptional performance in increasingly complex leadership roles, and it positioned me for command opportunities that represented the pinnacle of naval officership. Instead of celebrating my achievement, my father used the promotion ceremony as an opportunity to express his disappointment in front of extended family members and family friends who'd gathered to honor my success. "I'm proud that Elena has done well in her chosen career," he announced during the reception, "but I can't help wondering what she might have accomplished if she'd followed the family tradition and served in the army where real military leadership happens." The public humiliation was complete and devastating. At what should have been one of the proudest moments of my naval career, my own father had used the platform to suggest that my achievements were inferior to what I might have accomplished if I'd made different choices. That's when I realized that my father's disappointment had evolved into something much more toxic than simple disagreement about career paths. He genuinely believed that my naval service was a betrayal of family values and that my success in the Navy was actually evidence of my failure as a daughter and as a military officer. The stage was set for a confrontation that would require intervention from the highest levels of Navy leadership to resolve and would ultimately expose truths about my military service that would shatter my father's assumptions about honor, sacrifice, and what it really means to serve your country. The assignment that would ultimately define my naval career and create the most serious rift with my father came when I was selected for a position so classified that even acknowledging its existence required special security protocols. I couldn't tell my family where I was stationed, what my specific duties involved, or even how long the assignment would last. For 3 years, I essentially disappeared from family life. I missed birthdays, holidays, weddings, and family gatherings because my work schedule was unpredictable and my location was often classified. When I could attend family events, I looked exhausted, stressed, and was unable to discuss anything about my professional life beyond generic statements about serving my country and doing important work. From my father's perspective, my absence from family life was evidence that I'd chosen my career over family relationships and that my mysterious job was probably just an excuse to avoid family responsibilities. He'd convinced himself that I was stationed at some comfortable desk job somewhere, probably in Washington, D.C., pushing paperwork and calling it military service. "Elena's too important now to spend time with her family," he'd tell relatives when they asked about my absence from gatherings. "She's off doing classified work that's apparently more important than maintaining relationships with the people who raised her." The accusations escalated during my brother Carlos's wedding, when my father had been drinking and decided to publicly air his grievances about my career choices and family priorities. In front of extended family, friends, and wedding guests, he launched into a speech about military service, family loyalty, and the disappointment of having a daughter who'd chosen her career over everything else. "Elena thinks she's serving her country," he announced to the reception crowd, "but real military service requires sacrifice for family as well as country. She's become so obsessed with her Navy career that she's forgotten what family means." The public humiliation was devastating, but what came next was even worse. As the reception continued and my father's drinking increased, his criticism became more personal and more vicious. "You know what Elena's problem is," he told anyone who would listen. "She's forgotten that military service is about honor and sacrifice for others, not about building your own career and impressing your superiors. She's become selfish, and her military service reflects that selfishness." The final blow came when one of my father's army buddies asked about my current assignment and my father responded with the most hurtful accusation of my life: "Elena's probably doing some comfortable intelligence work where she gets to feel important while real military personnel are deployed in dangerous situations. She's basically become a military bureaucrat who's forgotten what actual service looks like." In fact, he continued, his voice rising with alcohol-fueled conviction, "I think Elena has become a traitor to everything this family stands for. She's betrayed our military tradition, she's abandoned her family responsibilities, and she's turned military service into a selfish career advancement opportunity." The word traitor hit me like a physical blow. My own father, a retired Army colonel who should have understood the meaning of military service and sacrifice, had just accused me of betraying everything he'd raised me to value. What made the accusation even more painful was that I couldn't defend myself without violating security protocols that could endanger ongoing operations and the lives of people who depended on the work I was doing. I was bound by oaths and clearances that prevented me from explaining that my absence from family events wasn't due to selfishness or career ambition, it was due to assignments that required sacrifices most people couldn't imagine. The wedding reception continued around us, but I felt isolated and devastated by my father's public accusations. Family members who'd heard his speech were looking at me with confusion and disappointment, clearly wondering if there was truth to his suggestions that I'd become too obsessed with my career to maintain family relationships. That's when I noticed Admiral Harrison approaching our table. Admiral Harrison was a legend in the Navy, a combat veteran who'd commanded aircraft carriers and served as Deputy Chief of Naval Operations before his current assignment as Head of Naval Special Operations. He was also someone who knew exactly what I'd been doing for the past 3 years and why my assignment required the level of secrecy that had created such problems with my family. "Colonel Rodriguez," Admiral Harrison said, extending his hand to my father. "I'm Admiral Harrison, and I believe you've been discussing your daughter's naval service." My father straightened up immediately, recognizing the significance of a 4-star admiral's presence at a family wedding. "Yes, sir. Elena's been serving in the Navy, though we don't hear much about what she actually does." Admiral Harrison's response would change everything between my father and me and would expose truths about my military service that would shatter every assumption my father had made about my career, my character, and my commitment to serving my country. Admiral Harrison's presence at my brother's wedding reception was not accidental. He'd been tracking the situation with my family for months, aware through Navy channels that my classified assignment was creating personal difficulties that could potentially impact my effectiveness and career progression. The Navy takes care of its officers, and when a rising star like me faces family problems due to the demands of classified service, senior leadership sometimes intervenes in ways that protect both the officer and operational security. "Colonel Rodriguez," Admiral Harrison continued, his tone respectful but firm, "I think there may be some misunderstandings about your daughter's service that need to be clarified." My father, slightly sobered by the presence of such senior military leadership, tried to backtrack from his earlier accusations. "Admiral, I have nothing but respect for the Navy and for Elena's career. I just wish she could be more involved with family activities." "Sir," Admiral Harrison replied, "I understand your concerns about family time, but I think you may not fully appreciate the nature of your daughter's service to our country." The conversation was drawing attention from other reception guests, who sensed that something significant was happening between the Admiral and my father. My mother, brother, and extended family members gradually gathered around our table, curious about why a 4-star admiral was discussing my naval career at a family wedding. "Colonel, may I ask what you understand about Elena's current assignment?" Admiral Harrison inquired with the kind of polite directness that senior officers use when they're about to deliver information that will change someone's perspective completely. My father, now clearly uncomfortable with the scrutiny, attempted to maintain his earlier position. "Well, Admiral, Elena's told us she does classified work, but in my experience, most classified assignments are administrative support roles that get dressed up to sound more important than they actually are." The silence that followed was uncomfortable and telling. Admiral Harrison studied my father for a moment, clearly evaluating how much information he could share without compromising operational security or violating my privacy. "Colonel Rodriguez," Admiral Harrison said finally, "I'm going to share some information with you that I hope will help you better understand your daughter's service, though I'll need to ask for your discretion about certain details." He paused, looking around the table to ensure he had everyone's attention, then continued with words that would completely transform my family's understanding of my naval career. "For the past 3 years, your daughter has been serving as the executive officer and then commanding officer of one of the Navy's most critical counterterrorism units. She's led operations in some of the most dangerous maritime environments in the world, pursuing terrorist networks that pose direct threats to American national security. My father's face went white as the implications of Admiral Harrison's words began to sink in. The comfortable desk job he'd imagined I was working was actually a command position in active counterterrorism operations. Sir, Admiral Harrison continued, Elena has personally led boarding operations on suspected terrorist vessels, coordinated international maritime security efforts, and disrupted weapons trafficking networks that were planning attacks on American targets. The wedding reception noise seemed to fade into the background as my family absorbed information that completely contradicted everything my father had assumed about my military service. 6 months ago, Admiral Harrison said, his voice dropping to ensure privacy, your daughter's unit intercepted a shipment of explosives that was intended for a terrorist attack on a major American port. The operation she planned and executed personally probably saved hundreds of American lives. My mother gasped audibly, and I could see tears starting in her eyes as she realized what I'd been doing during all those missed family gatherings. 3 months ago, Admiral Harrison continued, Elena led a joint operation with international partners that captured a terrorist cell leader who'd been planning coordinated attacks on American shipping lanes. The intelligence gathered from that operation has prevented multiple terrorist attacks that could have disrupted global commerce and cost American lives. My father was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of shock, pride, and what looked like shame for his earlier accusations. But Admiral Harrison wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small case that I recognized immediately. Colonel Rodriguez, he said, opening the case to reveal a Navy Cross, this is your daughter's Navy Cross, which she was awarded for extraordinary heroism during a counterterrorism operation that I cannot discuss in detail. She's one of only 12 women in Navy history to receive this decoration. The Navy Cross is the second highest military decoration for valor, equivalent to the Army's Distinguished Service Cross. My father, as a career Army officer, understood exactly what that medal represented and what level of courage and leadership was required to earn it. Elena couldn't attend the award ceremony, Admiral Harrison explained, because she was deployed on another classified operation at the time. She also couldn't tell her family about the award because the citation details remain classified due to ongoing security concerns. The silence at our table was complete and profound. My father was staring at the Navy Cross with tears in his eyes, finally understanding that his accusations of selfishness and betrayal had been directed at a daughter who'd been risking her life to protect American lives and interests. Then Admiral Harrison said the 3 words that would haunt my father and reshape our relationship forever, your daughter's classified. The impact of those 3 words, your daughter's classified, was immediate and devastating for my father. In one moment, Admiral Harrison had shattered every assumption, every criticism, and every accusation my father had made about my naval career and my commitment to service and family. Classified didn't just mean secret, it meant that my entire military identity was protected at levels that indicated national security significance. It meant that my absence from family events wasn't due to career ambition or selfishness, but because I was involved in operations so sensitive that acknowledging them could endanger lives and compromise ongoing national security efforts. My father sat frozen in his chair, staring at the Navy Cross while processing the implications of what Admiral Harrison had revealed. The daughter he'd accused of being a traitor was actually a decorated combat veteran who'd been leading counterterrorism operations that protected American lives. The meaningless bureaucratic work he'd imagined I was doing was actually command-level responsibility for some of the Navy's most critical missions. Admiral, my father said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, I had no idea. Elena never told us. I thought she was. Sir, Admiral Harrison interrupted gently, your daughter couldn't tell you. The level of classification surrounding her work means that discussing it with family members, even retired military family members, could result in court-martial and imprisonment. Elena has been carrying the burden of her service alone because the security requirements of her position demanded that sacrifice. My mother was crying openly now, understanding for the first time why I'd looked so exhausted and stressed during my brief family visits. The weight of commanding counterterrorism operations, making life-and-death decisions, and carrying classified responsibilities without being able to share the burden with family had been taking its toll for years. Elena, my mother said, reaching across the table to take my hand, we're so sorry. We didn't understand. But my father was still processing the magnitude of his misjudgment. The man who'd spent his army career understanding classified operations and the sacrifices they required had somehow failed to recognize that his own daughter might be involved in similar work. Colonel Rodriguez, Admiral Harrison continued, I want you to understand that your daughter is considered one of the Navy's most promising young leaders. Her combination of tactical excellence, strategic thinking, and leadership under pressure has made her indispensable to our counterterrorism efforts. He paused, looking directly at my father with the kind of intensity that comes from delivering information that needs to be clearly understood. Sir, Elena has voluntarily extended her classified assignment twice, turning down opportunities for traditional Navy career advancement because she believes the work she's doing is too important to abandon. She sacrificed promotions, traditional career progression, and family relationships because she's committed to protecting American lives. The revelation that I'd been turning down career opportunities to continue dangerous classified work was the final blow to my father's narrative about my supposed selfishness and career obsession. In fact, Admiral Harrison added, your daughter has been recommended for promotion to commander, which would make her one of the youngest female commanders in Navy history. The promotion has been delayed because her current assignment requires continuity of leadership that's more important than individual career advancement. My father finally found his voice, though it was shaky with emotion. Admiral, I owe Elena an apology that I don't know how to give. I've been completely wrong about everything. Sir, Admiral Harrison replied, what Elena needs from her family is understanding and support, not apologies. The work she's doing requires tremendous personal sacrifice, and having family support makes that sacrifice more bearable. Then Admiral Harrison delivered information that would complete my father's transformation and give him a new understanding of what military service actually means in the modern world. Colonel, I need you to understand that Elena's work represents the evolution of military service that your generation made possible. The counterterrorism operations she leads protect American interests in ways that traditional military engagement cannot. She's fighting a different kind of war, but it's no less important or dangerous than the conventional conflicts you faced in your career. The comparison to my father's own military service was deliberate and effective. Admiral Harrison was helping him understand that my naval career wasn't a betrayal of family military tradition, it was the continuation of that tradition in a new form that required different sacrifices and different kinds of courage. The wedding reception continued around us, but our table had become an island of family reconciliation and military brotherhood that transcended service branches and generations. Elena, my father said, looking at me with tears in his eyes, I've been the worst kind of fool. Can you forgive me? The moment I'd been hoping for throughout my entire naval career had finally arrived, but it felt different than I'd expected. Instead of vindication or satisfaction, I felt relief that the burden of carrying my service alone was finally being shared with family members who could understand and support what I was doing. But Admiral Harrison had one more revelation that would cement my father's respect and ensure that our family relationship was permanently transformed. Admiral Harrison wasn't finished with revelations that would reshape my family's understanding of my naval service and my place in military history. As the wedding reception continued around us, he pulled out his phone and showed my father a photograph that made him gasp audibly. The image showed me in dress blue uniform standing between the Secretary of the Navy and the Chief of Naval Operations, receiving what was clearly a significant award in a formal Pentagon ceremony. Colonel Rodriguez, Admiral Harrison explained, this photograph was taken 6 weeks ago when Elena received the Defense Superior Service Medal for her leadership of a joint task force that dismantled an international terrorism network. The operation took 18 months to complete and required coordination between Navy, Army, Marine Corps, and international partner forces. My father stared at the photograph with growing amazement. The Defense Superior Service Medal is one of the highest awards the military can bestow for non-combat leadership achievement, and receiving it at my age and rank indicated recognition at the highest levels of government. The terrorist network Elena's task force eliminated, Admiral Harrison continued, was responsible for planning attacks on multiple American military installations and civilian targets. The intelligence gathered during their operations has prevented dozens of potential terrorist attacks over the past year. But the most significant revelation was yet to come. "Sir," Admiral Harrison said, looking directly at my father, "I need to tell you that Elena has been selected for promotion to captain and assignment as commanding officer of the Navy's Elite Maritime Special Operations Command. She'll be the youngest female officer ever to command that unit, and only the third woman in Navy history to hold that position." The Maritime Special Operations Command is the Navy's premier counterterrorism and special warfare unit, responsible for the most sensitive and dangerous naval operations conducted anywhere in the world. Command of that unit represents the absolute pinnacle of naval special operations leadership. My father's military experience gave him enough background to understand exactly what Admiral Harrison had just announced. His daughter wasn't just successful in her naval career. She was being entrusted with command responsibilities that indicated recognition as one of the Navy's most exceptional young leaders. "Admiral," my father said, his voice filled with awe, "I had no idea that Elena was involved in operations at that level. Colonel, your daughter has been selected for accelerated promotion and command because her combination of tactical excellence, strategic thinking, and leadership under pressure is considered exceptional even by Navy Special Operations standards. She's being groomed for flag rank and senior leadership positions that could eventually include command of entire fleet operations." The implications were staggering. My father was learning that his daughter wasn't just serving competently in the Navy, she was being prepared for the kind of senior leadership roles that represented the absolute top of military achievement. "Sir," Admiral Harrison added, "Elena's assignment to Maritime Special Operations Command will require her to maintain the same level of operational security that's characterized her current work. She still won't be able to discuss her specific duties with family members, but I hope you now understand that her commitment to classified service represents the highest level of dedication to protecting American interests." My father nodded, clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning about my career and responsibilities. But Admiral Harrison had saved the most meaningful revelation for last. "Colonel Rodriguez," he said, reaching into his jacket again, "Elena asked me to give you this if the opportunity ever arose to discuss her service with you." He handed my father a letter that I'd written months earlier, when I'd realized that my classified assignments might prevent me from ever explaining my career choices to my family in person. My father opened the letter with shaking hands and began reading aloud. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means Admiral Harrison has been able to share some information about my naval service that I've never been allowed to discuss with you directly. I want you to know that every day of my military career has been inspired by the example you set during your Army service and the values you taught me about duty, honor, and country. I chose the Navy instead of the Army not because I wanted to reject our family's military tradition, but because I believed I could serve our country most effectively in maritime operations. The work I've been doing for the past several years has required sacrifices that I know have been difficult for our family to understand, but I hope you can now see that those sacrifices have been in service of missions that protect American lives and interests. Dad, I've always been proud to be your daughter and proud to continue the Rodriguez family tradition of military service, even if that service has taken a different form than you originally envisioned. I hope that when my current assignments allow me to discuss them more openly, you'll be proud of what your daughter has accomplished in the Navy." The letter was signed with love and respect, Lieutenant Commander Elena Rodriguez, United States Navy. My father finished reading the letter with tears streaming down his face, finally understanding that my naval career had always been about honoring the values he'd taught me, not rejecting them. "Elena," he said, standing up and embracing me with emotion that felt like years of misunderstanding finally being resolved, "I'm so proud of you. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." The healing that followed was immediate and profound. My mother, brother, and extended family members who'd witnessed Admiral Harrison's revelations began asking questions about my service that showed genuine interest and respect rather than criticism and disappointment. But the most meaningful moment came when my father asked Admiral Harrison a question that showed how completely his perspective had changed. "Admiral, is there anything our family can do to support Elena's service better? We want to understand how to be the kind of family that a naval officer of her caliber deserves." Admiral Harrison's response would cement my family's transformation and give them the framework for supporting my continued service in ways that honored both my military commitments and our family relationships. 6 months after that transformative wedding reception, my relationship with my family has been completely rebuilt on a foundation of understanding, respect, and genuine pride in military service that transcends service branches and encompasses the full spectrum of modern military operations. My father, who once called me a traitor, now introduces me as my daughter, the Navy captain with a pride that makes up for years of misunderstanding and disappointment. The promotion to captain came through 3 months after Admiral Harrison's intervention, along with my assignment as commanding officer of Maritime Special Operations Command. The ceremony was classified due to the sensitive nature of my new position, but my family was able to attend and witness me taking command of one of the Navy's most elite units. Captain Rodriguez, my father said after the ceremony, using my rank with obvious satisfaction, I finally understand what you meant when you said you wanted to serve your country in the way that inspired you most. What you're doing is exactly what military service should be, protecting American lives and interests through excellence, dedication, and personal sacrifice. The transformation in our family dynamics has been remarkable and healing. Instead of defending my career choices or trying to justify my absence from family events, I now have family members who understand that my military service requires sacrifices that should be supported rather than criticized. My mother has become particularly vocal about educating other military families about the challenges faced by service members in classified assignments. People don't understand, she tells anyone who will listen, that some of our military heroes can't tell their own families about the important work they're doing to keep us safe. My brother Carlos, who'd always felt guilty about not following the family military tradition, now understands that supporting military family members is its own form of service. He's established a non-profit organization that provides support services for families of service members in classified assignments, helping them cope with the uncertainty and isolation that comes with having loved ones in sensitive military positions. But the most meaningful change has been in my father's approach to military tradition and family legacy. Instead of viewing my naval service as a departure from family values, he now sees it as the evolution of those values in response to modern security challenges. The Rodriguez family military tradition, he told relatives during a recent family gathering, has always been about serving our country with honor and excellence. Elena is continuing that tradition in ways that meet the challenges of the 21st century. I couldn't be prouder of what she's accomplished or more grateful that she's protecting American interests with the same values I tried to teach her. The practical changes in our family relationships have been equally significant. My parents now understand that my absence from family events is due to operational requirements rather than personal choices, and they've learned to treasure the time we do have together rather than focusing on the time we don't. When I am able to attend family gatherings, conversations focus on general military topics rather than specific operational details, and my family has learned to show support and interest without asking questions that I can't answer due to security requirements. Most importantly, my father has become an advocate for military families dealing with similar challenges. He speaks at veteran organizations about the importance of supporting family members in classified assignments and the need to understand that modern military service takes forms that previous generations might not immediately recognize or appreciate. Military service has evolved, he tells audiences, and we need to evolve our understanding of what it means to support our service members. Some of our greatest military heroes are doing work that they can't discuss with their own families, and they need our support and understanding rather than our criticism and demands for information. The ripple effects of our family reconciliation have extended beyond immediate relationships to impact how I approach my military leadership responsibilities. Having family support for my career has reduced the stress and isolation that had been affecting my effectiveness as a commander, and it's allowed me to focus entirely on mission success rather than managing family disappointment. My current assignment leading Maritime Special Operations Command has been the most challenging and rewarding of my military career. The unit conducts counterterrorism operations, maritime interdiction missions, and international security cooperation efforts that directly protect American interests and save American lives. The work requires the same level of classification that created problems with my family, but now I have family members who understand that my inability to discuss specific operations is evidence of the importance of my work rather than proof of its insignificance. So here's my question for all of you: have you ever had family members misunderstand your career or life choices because they couldn't see the full picture? How would you handle a situation where your family's expectations conflicted with your professional obligations? Do you think my father's transformation was genuine, or should I have been more resistant to reconciliation after years of criticism? I love hearing from other military families and anyone who's faced misunderstanding from people they care about. Drop your stories in the comments below, whether it's about family members who didn't understand your service, relatives who criticized your career choices, or situations where classified work created barriers with loved ones. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about military families, the challenges of classified service, and the importance of supporting our service members even when we don't understand exactly what they're doing. Share this video with anyone who serves or has military family. Awareness about the sacrifices of classified assignments can help families better support their service members. Thank you for watching my story about family reconciliation and military understanding. Remember, sometimes the people we love are doing work that's too important to discuss, and our job as family members is to support them rather than demand explanations they can't provide. The best way to honor military service is to trust that our service members are doing important work and to show them love and support regardless of whether we understand all the details. Here's to Admiral Harrison, whose intervention changed my family forever and helped my father understand what modern military service really means. Here's to classified service members everywhere who carry the burden of protecting our country without being able to share that burden with the people they love most. And here's to military families who learn to support their heroes even when they can't understand exactly what they're being asked to sacrifice. Until next time, keep serving with honor and never let anyone convince you that your service is less valuable because they can't see or understand all the details. Sometimes the most important work is the work that stays hidden, and sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose stories can never be fully told. Your daughter's classified, Dad. And I'm proud to serve in ways that you taught me to value, even when you couldn't see how those lessons applied to my chosen path. Huya Navy, and thank you for finally understanding.